Welcome to my channel. This is the first in a series of videos I'm going to be doing about dementia. If you or someone you know has had a diagnosis of dementia, then keep watching. This video is a basic introduction to the subject of dementia, and I do this by dispelling some very common myths about the condition. Dementia equals Alzheimer's. This is the biggest misconception there is about dementia, and you see it in the press and on the television that people are using the words dementia and Alzheimer's alternately as if they're the same thing. Dementia is a collection of symptoms. They are symptoms of an underlying brain disease, of which there are many. The main, most common one is Alzheimer's, but it's not the only one. You also have something called frontotemporal dementia, something called dementia with Lewy bodies, vascular dementia, and they all have different symptom pictures. They're all caused by a different problem in the brain. So it's really important not to confuse dementia and Alzheimer's thinking they're the same thing, because they really aren't. And that leads on to an important point, which is if you or someone that you love has had a diagnosis of dementia, just dementia, if you can try and dig a bit deeper and ask for a more specific diagnosis. So you want to know what the disease or condition that's underlying the dementia is. That's important because it can help give you some idea of what's to come, how that disease might progress, because they all have a slightly different picture. And although not everyone with Alzheimer's, not everyone with frontotemporal dementia will present in exactly the same way, they have commonalities. And knowing what those commonalities have will help you support the person that you know who has had that diagnosis. Dementia equals memory loss. Another misconception. We've just spoken about all the different disease processes and conditions that can cause dementia, and each of those diseases and conditions have their own symptom picture. Lots of overlap, and yes, memory problems are common to many of them, but there are loads of other things that it's important to be aware of that are associated with each of those conditions. So for example, somebody with vascular dementia, one of the first things you might see is a change in their emotion. So they may become very over-emotional, quite tearful, get upset very easily. Or the opposite, they may become very flat and disinterested, almost depressed. With dementia with Lewy bodies, you might see someone experiencing visual hallucinations. They may see people or animals that you can't see. Lewy body is also associated with a higher falls risk, and that's why it can sometimes be confused with Parkinson's. Sometimes someone can be diagnosed as having dementia when they have Parkinson's, and vice versa. With frontotemporal dementia, you might see a loss of inhibitions. So the person may start saying or doing things that are totally out of character and that previously would have embarrassed them or they would have felt was totally inappropriate. With frontotemporal, you might also experience speech issues, not being able to find the right words, not being able to say the things that they want to say. And of course, with Alzheimer's, yes, memory loss is one of the classic symptoms. Dementia is synonymous with old age. Yes, it is something that we more commonly see with older people than younger people, but it's important to recognise that dementia isn't something you automatically get when you get older. It isn't a normal part of ageing. It is a brain disease or condition. There are things that might make you more susceptible to developing a dementia condition as you get older, but it's not a normal part of aging. People can also develop dementia at a very young age. Anybody who develops dementia under the age of 65 is described as having young onset dementia, which used to be called early onset dementia. So anyone under the age of 65, that has a greater likelihood of being caused by a genetic component. So it's something that runs in families, and sometimes will have a higher incidence of mobility issues associated with those early signs of dementia. So things like having a higher risk of falls in the early stages of their dementia. But the underlying illnesses and diseases are essentially the same, at whatever age that you develop the dementia. Dementia is anyone who's confused. And we need to be a little bit careful here because there are two other Ds which disguise themselves as dementia. The first of which is depression, and there is misdiagnosis possibilities here of somebody being diagnosed as having depression, but actually they have dementia. Depression can be associated with dementia as the disease progresses through, but just because you have depression doesn't mean you have dementia, and vice versa. And the other D that we need to be aware of is delirium. Delirium is something that is more common in older people. The way to distinguish it from dementia is delirium comes on very quickly. It can come on in a matter of hours or overnight, whereas dementia develops over quite a long period of time. Delirium is characterised by confusion and distress. It can also be characterised by the opposite, a kind of complete shutdown. And it's caused by an underlying physical process like a dehydration or an infection, something like a urinary tract infection or a chest infection. So if somebody that you know has suddenly developed these symptoms which you think, oh my goodness, they've just suddenly developed dementia overnight, no, it's probably delirium, and it's really important that you get them checked out by a doctor to find out what's causing that delirium, and it can be treated. Dementia is treatable. Unfortunately not. There is no cure at the moment for dementia. There are some drugs that can be used to slow down the condition, but it's not curable. They won't stop the dementia. And they can only be used in certain circumstances with certain people, and really only in the earlier stages of the disease. And that's why it's important to try and get a diagnosis early. Understandably, there's a lot of fear around a diagnosis of dementia, so it can be tempting to put it off because you don't want to know. But there are good reasons for getting an early diagnosis, and the potential of being able to take treatments is one of them. The other reasons for wanting an early diagnosis is so that you can plan and you can put things in place to make life as easy and comfortable for that person as possible. So if there isn't a cure and drugs aren't available for the person that you love, what can you do? I think the best approach is education. It's finding out, hopefully getting that right diagnosis, not just a blanket dementia diagnosis, but an accurate diagnosis, which means you can then go away and educate yourself. There are loads of websites and YouTube videos and books. There's fictional books people have written around the subject of dementia, which are a really good, easy way to get to the bottom of how dementia progresses, the best way to be able to help somebody who has dementia to lead as good a positive life as possible, because it is possible, particularly in the early stages. So educate yourself. That's the biggest tip that I can give anybody who knows anybody, even if it's a friend, even if it's not your mum or your dad, even if it's just a friend that you know who's had this diagnosis. Go away and learn about it, because you will be able to do so much to help. And finally, dementia means that you have to stop doing what you love. And this is super important to point out, that especially in the early stages of dementia, when you get that diagnosis, it doesn't mean that you need to give up work necessarily. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to stop going out, socialising, doing the things that you love, doing the gardening, going and playing golf. It's important to keep as active and engaged and stimulated as you can for as long as possible. There's lots of evidence out there to suggest that it helps, and that might mean that you need to give a little bit of extra support to the person who has a diagnosis, but there are so many things out there to help you do that. So don't give up. Don't give up on that person. Keep positive, keep doing things, keep persuading them to maintain the life that they did the day before they were diagnosed, and be as independent and active as possible. I'm going to be doing loads more videos around the subject of dementia, more practical things about how you can help and the things that you can do. If there's anything particular you want to know about, any questions, any issues, feel free to put them down in the comments below and I'll see if I can help. But in the meantime, keep educating yourself, and thanks for watching. All the information to go with this film is in the notes below. Just click on the little arrow or the show more just under the picture. I'd love you to leave comments, and if you'd like to see more of these films, don't forget to hit the red subscribe button.